Ideas. So, in the first part of this video, we have discussed the contributions of Sigmund Freud in the field of psychoanalysis. And his psychoanalytic theory was classified into three parts. In the first part, we discussed the structure of the mind and the psyche based on the topographical and the structural models. So, in the second part of this video, we will be discussing Freud's theory of instincts and libido and the theory of psychosexual development. First, moving on to the theory of instincts and libido. The theory of instincts and libido is a central aspect of psychoanalytic theory, and according to Freud, human behavior is largely motivated by unconscious psychological forces that he called instincts or drives. In his 1920 essay, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Sigmund Freud marks a major turning point in his theoretical approach. Freud had said that these instincts are primarily focused on seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. So, our mind basically tries to find pleasure. And in this essay, Beyond the Pleasure Principle, Freud went beyond that simple pleasure principle and he develops the theory of instincts or drives. Freud believed in the role of instinct in creating human behavior, and he postulated two main instincts, namely the life instinct and the death instinct. He said that these two instincts are the source of all psychic energy available in human. The life instinct is known as eros and the death instinct is known as thanatos. We'll look at it in detail, but first let us see what is this pleasure principle and reality principle. Pleasure principle and reality principle are concepts in psychology proposed by Sigmund Freud. The pleasure principle suggests that people seek pleasure and avoid pain. And this is a fundamental drive and motivation for human behavior. We all have a tendency to seek pleasure and avoid pain. That is general human behavior according to Freud. And this pleasure principle is the inherent human tendency to seek immediate gratification of one's desires and needs, regardless of the consequence. We don't think about the consequence. Our mind is always seeking pleasure. We want immediate gratification of our desires and our needs. For example, if you feel hungry, your mind desires that you get food on the spot. You don't think about the consequences, whether you have food available, what time, what sort of food, do you have money to buy it. These things will not be considered by our mind. It just wants to satisfy its hunger. Okay, it just wants to seek pleasure. It just wants to gratify its desire. And this pleasure principle is often associated with the id. And id, it is the primitive and instinctual part of the human psyche. The reality principle, on the other hand, is the opposite of the pleasure principle, because it is the ability of the mind to postpone instant pleasure or gratification in accordance with the reality of the external world. That means it is that part of our mind which considers the demands of reality. It is the recognition that not all desires can be met immediately. Our mind will have so many desires, but at one point we realize that everything cannot be fulfilled immediately. And sometimes that one must work towards a goal, or we have to delay our gratification in order to achieve something. Okay. So Freud has said that id operates on the pleasure principle, whereas ego operates on the reality principle. That means the ego considers the external world and attempts to satisfy its desires in a way that is acceptable in the real world. And we have the superego. The superego works according to the morality principle. It is full of morals. It helps us to uh, follow the path of goodness, virtue. So, this reality principle is an important part of a healthy psychological functioning, and it allows individuals to understand the needs of the real world and to find and respect the needs and rights of others as well. Okay, so this is the pleasure principle and the reality principle. Next, we move on to the two main instincts postulated by Freud: Eros, or the life instinct, and Thanatos, or the death instinct. The name Eros is inspired from Greek mythology. It is the god of love, Eros. And in his Beyond the Pleasure principle, Sigmund Freud applied the concept of Eros to psychoanalysis. He refers to Eros as the life instinct, which includes a drive or a feeling towards self preservation and the desire for pleasure, which includes sexual pleasure as well as other life sustaining activities such as eating, drinking, nurturing others, etc. So, Eros is that life instinct or that drive which prompts us to live, okay, which inspires or which motivates us to live. We need comfort, we need pleasure, we need food, we need water, we need shelter, we need all those life sustaining things, conditions to nurture our life, to make our life better and happy and comfortable. So, all these elements that are necessary to preserve and prolong life, both for the individual as well as for the human race. This is called Eros. And this drive or this instinct is also associated with behaviors that support harmony among people, such as cooperation, collaboration, etc. You work together as a team, you work with people, that family feeling, that together feeling, all this is part of Eros. And Freud said that there is an energy or force that fuels the human mind uh, and motivates us towards pleasure, including sexual pleasure. Okay, there is an energy that fuels the human mind or the human psyche. It motivates us towards pleasure, to find pleasure in things, to find happiness in things. There is an energy that fuels our mind, and this energy or that force that drives us towards pleasure or sexual pleasure is called libido. Here, when he means sexual energy, it doesn't mean eroticism or something erotic in nature. Rather, it pertains to anything pleasurable to a person. For example, if you find doing exercises as a very pleasurable activity, some people like engaging in sports, it gives you some sort of pleasure. That is what he means by that sexual energy, that pleasurable energy, or that pleasurable force, or that libido. Okay, for example, some people like reading a book, that gives them a sort of pleasure. For some, sleeping is an activity that gives you pleasure. So it can differ, but anything uh, that drives, that energy, that motivates us towards pleasure, that energy is called libido. So libido believes in that pleasure principle. So when you are doing anything that is interesting to you, when you are doing anything that is deriving some sort of pleasure to you, it is the eros or the life instinct that is working. So that is eros. Now let's look at thanatos, or the death instinct. So, according to Freud, eros is just one part of the dual system. The other part, its counterpart, is thanatos, which is the death instinct. So, it includes negative feelings like hate, anger, aggression, then antisocial behavior, sadism, violence, etc. So you will have both these instincts within you, both the life instinct as well as the death instinct, and both need to be in a sort of balance. Okay, you cannot be all pleasure. You cannot go after everything that is deriving pleasure. It doesn't happen that way. Similarly, you cannot be a completely negative person as well. You have this thing coming up. This both the life instincts as well as the death instincts. So, just like that, it serves to balance the heroes by driving the individual as well as the human race towards death and extinction. So, all living organisms have this dualistic nature. They have a drive towards self preservation, that is eros, as well as a drive towards destruction, that is thanatos. And Freud theorized that the eros and thanatos cannot exist without each other. It's like Tom and Jerry. They cannot exist without each other. That both the life instinct and the death instinct correspond and clash with each other in a lifelong struggle. That's what I said. You cannot be completely eros. Similarly, you cannot be completely thanatos. You are a mixture of both. Freud held that when one's life instinct is not allowed to function or govern one's behavior, then the death instinct comes into the picture. For example, when one is not permitted to seek, or one is not having any sort of pleasure, happiness in their life, normally they have a tendency to be very aggressive. They will fall into depression. Negative thoughts occupy their mind. They tend to be suicidal or self destructive. They tend to have sadistic pleasures. They tend to resort to violence. Okay. So, the variation in both these instincts, you need to have a very balanced uh, situation in order to have a very balanced and normal personality. But if the proportions are not equal, then you will have a maladjusted personality or a neurotic personality or maybe a delinquent personality. Okay, so that's his theory of instincts and the libido. Next, we move on to the third part of Freud's psychoanalytic theory called the theory of psychosexual development. Freud's theory of psychosexual development is a central aspect of his broader theory of human personality development. According to Freud, children go through a series of psychosexual stages that lead to the development of the adult personality. This theory described how personality developed over the course of childhood. There are 5 stages according to Freud's psychosexual development theory, and each of these stages are focused on a different erogenous zone. An erogenous zone is a sensitive area of the body. Okay, it is a sensitive area of the body that can generate pleasurable sensations when stimulated. Okay, it is a sensitive area of the body that can generate pleasurable sensations when stimulated. And examples of erogenous zones include mouth, lips, tongue, anus, genitals. But other areas of the body can also be considered erogenous zones depending on a person's individual preferences and experiences. So, according to Freud's psychosexual development theory, each stage of psychosexual development is characterized by a specific erogenous zone. And erogenous zone is that area of the body that is most sensitive to pleasure during that stage. So, now let us look at the 5 psychosexual stages. The first stage is the oral stage. The oral stage happens from birth to the first year of life, that is from birth to age 1. And at this point, the erogenous zone is mouth. The primary focus of pleasure is on the mouth, lips, and tongue. Infants derive pleasure from sucking, biting, and chewing. So, the mouth represents the first sex organ for providing pleasure to the child. And you should always remember here, when we mean by sexuality, sex organ, it is not that erotic meaning that should be attributed. It means something that derives pleasure. Okay, for example, a child, by putting his own thumb, by putting a candy, by putting an insect into its mouth, it derives some sort of pleasure out of it. That is that sexual energy or sexual pleasure that we are talking about. And Freud says that sometimes you will be overstimulated. That means even after 1 year, some children keep on sucking their thumb or uh, keep on being stimulated by the mouth. So that should be corrected by the parents. Otherwise, when he grows into an adult, he may become so dependent or alcoholic, or become a chatterbox, or tend to smoking or eating too much or nail biting. See, these are all associated with mouth, right? So that sort of fixation should be avoided, should be corrected by elders. So that is the first stage. The second is the anal stage. That is from the age range is from 1 year to 3 years. And at this time, the erogenous zone is the bowel and bladder control. At this stage, the interest of the child shifts from the mouth as the erogenous zone to the organs of elimination, that is the anus or the urethra. He derives pleasure by holding back or telling or letting go of the body's waste material through the anus or the urethra. At this stage, the child gets the toilet training, and developing this control leads to a sense of accomplishment and independence. And Freud states that success at this stage is dependent upon the way in which parents approach toilet training. Parents who utilize praise and rewards for using the toilet at the appropriate time, they encourage positive outcomes and helps the child to feel capable and independent. However, not all parents provide the support and encouragement that children need during this stage. Some parents insist on punishment, ridicule, or shame. And such inappropriate parental responses can result in negative outcomes. So, the anal stage is the second stage of the psychosexual development. Moving on to the third stage, called the phallic stage. And the age range is from 3 to 6 years. And the erogenous zone are the genitals. So, Freud suggested that during the phallic stage, the primary focus of the libido is on the genitals. At this age, children also begin to discover the difference between male and female. Freud also believed that boys begin to view their fathers as a rival for the mother's affection, and it is at this point that the Oedipus complex develops. Hmm? We have the Oedipus complex and the Electra complex, about which we'll discuss in detail later. So, at this phallic stage, children become aware of their gender identity, and initially they develop a sexual attraction to the opposite sex parent. And in this stage, the primary erogenous zone is the genitals, and children become curious about their own bodies and those of others. Now, this stage is very important for the development of a healthy gender identity and a sense of morality based on social norms and parental values. The fourth stage is called the latent stage, and the age range is from 6 years to puberty. During this time, the sexual feelings are inactive. That means the libido is inactive. And during this stage, the superego continues to develop, while the id, the energies of the id, are suppressed. Children develop social skills, values, and relationships with peers and adults outside the family. The development of the ego and superego contribute to this period of calmness. The stage begins around the time that the child enter school and become concerned with uh, friends, hobbies, and other interests. And this latent period is a time in which the sexual energy is repressed or dormant. This energy is present, but it is sublimated into other areas such as studies or sports or social interactions, etc. And this stage is very important in the development of social skills, communication skills, development of confidence, etc. The final stage is the genital stage, and the age range is from puberty to a person's death. And the erogenous zone is the maturing sexual instincts or the sexual interests. And at this stage, the onset of puberty, causes the libido to become active once again. In the previous stage, the latent stage, the libido was inactive, but in this genital stage, the libido becomes active once again. And the individual, during this final stage of psychosexual development, the individual develops a strong sexual interest in the opposite sex. And this stage begins during puberty but lasts throughout the rest of a person's life. And we can see a difference between this stage and the other stages, the previous stages. In the earlier stages, the focus was on individual needs, individual pleasures, okay, be it oral, anal, phallic, latent, etc. But in this genital stage, the interests of of others, the welfare of others, those feelings develop during this stage. And the goal of this stage is to uh, establish a balance between the various life areas. And according to Freud, he believed that during this stage, the ego and the superego are fully formed and functioning at this point. Um, but you should remember that if the other stages, if the previous stages uh, are not completed successfully, then the individual will not have a balanced or warm and caring personality. But if the other stages are completed successfully, then the individual becomes or develops a very balanced personality. Okay, and at this stage, at the genital stage of development, we see that individuals are able to balance or control their basic urges, and they conform to the demands of reality, social norms, etc. So, this is Freud's theory of psychosexual development, and these are the 5 psychosexual stages. Anyway, there were a lot of criticism directed against these 5 stages. Many of them said that it is focusing entirely on male development, and it doesn't mention too much about female psychosexual development. And some said that his theories are difficult to test scientifically. These concepts like libido, it is impossible to measure and therefore cannot be tested. Some said that the theory is based on case studies and not empirical research. Because Freud based his theory on the recollections of his adult patients and not on actual observation and study of children. So there were a lot of criticism directed against these theories, but still, when you look at the theory, the psychoanalytic theory postulated by Freud, these are the important aspects. And before concluding, we have one more concept to discuss, that is Oedipus complex. And I told you that during the phallic stage, that is from the 3 to 6, when the erogenous zone is the genitals, when the gender identity develops in the child, Freud believed that boys begin to uh, view their fathers as a rival for their mother's affection. And this is what he called the Oedipus complex, and it was introduced in 1899. And it is a concept that refers to a child's attraction towards the opposite sex parent and a feeling of competition with the same sex parent. That is a boy child. This is traditionally, Freud talks about the male child. So it describes a male child's attraction towards the mother, that is the opposite sex parent, and he feels a sort of rivalry with the same sex parent, that is his father. Okay, and he said that boys experience a sort of castration anxiety. Castration anxiety refers to a sort of fear that the boy child feels that he will be punished by the father for these sort of feelings for his mother. This is called castration anxiety. So, this is Freud's concept of Oedipus complex. Likewise, you have its Electra complex, the female counterpart, That term was introduced, it's not a Freudian concept, it was introduced by Freud's disciple Carl Jung, and it refers to the opposite, that is, a girl child's attraction towards her opposite sex parent, that is her father, and a sense of rivalry and resentment towards the same sex parent, that is her mother. And in terms of Oedipus complex, boys experience castration anxiety, and here girls experience a sort of fear called penis envy. And penis envy is a concept which suggests that girls develop a desire for a penis during the phallic stage of psychosexual development. That means girls realize that they lack a penis, and they perceive this as a loss or a lack of power. This realization leads to feelings of inferiority and envy towards boys who possess a penis. So, this is how these psychologists explain how females develop that inferiority complex, and they believe that male is powerful, superior, etc. But again, there is a lot of criticism directed against this concept, and many of them have challenged this idea, um, arguing that it is purely based on cultural uh, biases and assumptions. So, in modern psychology, the concept of penis envy is not widely accepted and is often seen as an outdated and problematic concept. So, this is something just you need to keep in mind. So, with that, we complete Freud's theory of psychoanalysis. Thank you.